5 years after my divorce, I found myself in a position I never expected. At 38, I was sitting in my office, staring at an email that could either be the sweetest taste of karma or the most profound moral dilemma of my life. My mind raced as I thought back on everything that had brought me to this moment, the series of events that now hung like a fragile thread between me and a decision that could shape everything. It all started when my ex-wife and I split after 12 years of marriage. We had 2 wonderful children, a daughter, 9, and a son, 7, at the time of the divorce. We managed to part ways without much drama, agreeing on joint custody and vowing to keep things civil for the sake of kids. It seemed like we were handling it maturely. But life took a turn 6 months after the divorce when she started dating someone new, an executive at a tech startup. He was the type of guy who wore flashy watches, talked about his Tesla every chance he got, and made sure everyone knew about his latest business triumphs. At first, I didn't think much of it. I wanted my children to be happy and well-adjusted, and his presence in their lives didn't seem like a problem at the time. However, things changed quickly after they married just a year later. Suddenly, my time with the kids became more complicated. Weekend plans would mysteriously change. My calls would go unanswered, and I started feeling like I was being pushed out of the picture. The real gut punch came when my daughter called me one night. Her voice was small, uncertain, and it broke my heart when she told me, "Dad, Mom and Stepdad want us to change our last name." It felt as though someone had physically knocked the air from my lungs. My last name, the name that connected me to my children, the name that had been passed down through generations, was about to be erased. "They say it will make us more like a real family," my daughter explained, her words trailing off. I tried to keep my composure, to be the reasonable father, but it was impossible. I called my ex, hoping to have a calm discussion, but she dismissed me with a cold. "It's just a name, and it's confusing for the kids. Besides, this is what they want." I knew this wasn't their idea. My children, at 10 and 8, were easily influenced, and their new stepfather, with his expensive gifts and promises of Disney vacations, had worked hard to manipulate them. There wasn't much I could do legally, either. My ex had primary custody, and while the name change was a gray area, a court battle would only drag my children through emotional turmoil. So I swallowed my pride, and with a heavy heart, I watched as their birth certificates were amended. The next few years were difficult. My ex's husband, the so-called stepdad, continued his campaign to replace me. He insisted on attending parent-teacher conferences, introducing himself as the kid's father. He scheduled lavish vacations during my visitation time, using them as leverage to paint me as the bad guy when I objected. My son would ask, "Dad, why don't you want us to go to Europe?" I could see the confusion in his eyes, but I also knew it wasn't his fault. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my work, building my financial consulting business. Partly it was to distract myself from the emotional pain, but mostly it was because I wanted to provide for my kids. I wanted to show them that, while I couldn't afford luxury vacations, I was stable, reliable, and always there for them. But the relationship with my children started to strain. They were teenagers now, already pulling away as kids do, but the constant pressure from their stepfather only made things worse. Their visits to my modest apartment were marked by comparisons to their mom's house with its pool and home theater. It stung when they said, "Your place is nice, Dad." But I could hear the unsaid words, the quiet judgment. Still, we had our moments. I helped them with homework, made Sunday pancakes, and taught my son how to drive in an empty parking lot. I clung to those moments, believing that someday they would understand. Then, about 6 months ago, my daughter, now 14, called me out of the blue one Tuesday night. She was crying. "Dad, can I come stay with you for a while, please?" I didn't hesitate. I drove to pick her up. On the way, she explained that she had gotten into a huge argument with her stepdad. He was controlling, monitoring her phone, and freaking out when she texted a boy from school. When she got upset, he called her ungrateful, and her mom just sided with him, as always. It was the first crack in the perfect family facade. Over the next few weeks, my daughter started spending more time at my place, and soon my son, now 12, joined her. They began opening up about life with their stepdad. The lavish gifts came with strings attached, and the luxurious vacations were full of tension and arguments. They described a perfect family that was actually walking on eggshells around a man with a volatile temper. He doesn't hit us or anything, my son clarified. He just gets really mad and then gives us a silent treatment for days. I listened, biting my tongue. I wanted to scream, to rail against her stepfather, but I knew better. My kids needed me to stay calm, to be supportive, and that's exactly what I did. I didn't badmouth their mother or her husband, even though it took every ounce of restraint I had. Then came the bombshell. 2 months ago, my daughter asked if she could live with me full time. My son wanted the same. I carefully navigated the conversation with my ex, and to my surprise, she was agreeable. I think her marriage was starting to show cracks too, and teenagers were proving to be a challenge even in the best circumstances. We didn't go to court, but in practice, the kids now live with me full time, visiting their mom and stepdad on weekends. It felt like vindication after years of being pushed aside, but more importantly, my relationship with my kids was healing. We were becoming a real family again. But then, yesterday, I received an email that turned everything upside down. It came from a business associate, forwarding information about a potential client seeking financial restructuring services. The client was a tech startup facing a serious cash flow problem. I did some digging and discovered that the company was on the brink of bankruptcy. They needed someone with my expertise to help secure new funding and restructure their debt, or they would fold within months. The kicker? The company was where my ex's husband worked as CFO. The irony hit me like a punch to the gut. The man who had systematically tried to replace me, who had convinced my children to change their last name, and who had made me feel insignificant with his flaunting of success, now needed my help to save his job. The question burned in my mind. Should I help them? Should I offer my expertise and, in the process, bring his world crashing down? Or should I let his company fold, letting him pay the price for the years of emotional manipulation he put my kids and me through? The email sat there in front of me, a crossroads of opportunity and moral quandary. I could walk away from it, or I could step in and let karma take its course. It was an opportunity one never thought would come. But now, with everything at stake, I had to decide whether to take advantage of it or rise above it. I sat at my desk for hours, staring at the email, caught between two opposing forces, savage satisfaction and a deep sense of responsibility. My first instinct was to revel in the irony. Let him fail. Let him feel the crushing blow of losing everything. Let him lose the fancy house, the pool, the lifestyle that my kids had once chosen over my humble apartment. He deserved to experience the kind of loss that he had put me through, the kind of loss I had felt when my children were made to forget me and take on his name instead. But then I thought about my children. They may not bear my last name anymore, but they were still mine. Their stepfather's potential downfall wouldn't just be a strike against them. It would ripple through their lives, destabilizing everything. The financial strain could hurt their mother, disrupt their home life, and shake their sense of security. As much as I longed for retribution, I had to ask myself, was it worth it if it meant further hurting my kids? The internal conflict raged through me, but after a sleepless night, I made my decision. I would take the job, but not for him, never for him. I was doing it for my children. I arranged a meeting to be at my office, a small comfort of control in an otherwise uncomfortable situation. When my ex's husband walked in and saw me sitting behind the desk, his face drained of color. "You're the financial consultant?" he asked, his voice betraying his shock. Small world. I replied coolly, keeping my expression neutral. The meeting was tense, but professional. I laid out exactly what I could do for his company, the approach I would take, and my fees, which were on the high end, but fair given the complexity of their situation. He was silent for a long moment, absorbing the information. Finally, he cleared his throat. "About the past, the kid's name change," he began. I cut him off before he could go any further. "This is a business meeting. Let's keep it that way." He nodded, almost relieved that he wouldn't have to address the tangled history between us. As he left, I added one condition. I need direct access to all financial records. No gatekeeping. No filtered information. Complete transparency. He hesitated for a split second, but there was no escaping it. He agreed, knowing he had no choice. For the next 3 weeks, I threw myself into the work. Long 14-hour days became the norm. I combed through financial statements, met with potential investors, and created a restructuring plan that might save the company. The numbers weren't good. Years of mismanagement and reckless expansion had left the company teetering on the brink of collapse. I uncovered several questionable accounting practices that, while not strictly illegal, skirted ethical boundaries. Most of these decisions had my ex's husband's fingerprints all over them. I could have used this information to destroy him. A single leak to the board about his creative bookkeeping could have ended his career in finance. The temptation was almost unbearable. But then I thought of my children again. They didn't need more drama, more upheaval. They had already been through enough. So instead of using this knowledge to burn him, I privately confronted him with the facts and incorporated the necessary fixes into my restructuring plan. His relief was evident, though it was laced with the humiliation of knowing that I had him at my mercy. Still, the work continued, and yesterday I presented the completed plan to the board of directors. It was well received. I'm good at what I do, regardless of personal feelings. The company would survive, though with significant changes. My ex's husband would keep his job, but he had lost most of his authority and a significant portion of his compensation. As we were leaving the boardroom, he stopped me in the hallway. "Why did you help us? After everything?" he asked, trailing off, unsure of how to finish the question. "Not everything is about you," I replied simply, my voice level, not giving away the depth of what I was really feeling. Later that night, I was at home, preparing dinner with my kids. It was a routine we had settled into during the past few months, making dinner together, talking about our day. As we stood around the counter, my daughter casually mentioned, "I've been thinking about changing my last name back. It's weird having a different name than you, Dad." She was sprinkling cheese over a pasta bake as she spoke, and my son nodded in agreement. "Yeah, and Stepdad's been all weird lately. Stress and stuff. Mom says he might have to sell the Tesla." I managed to keep my expression neutral, though the words stung more than I expected. "Whatever you decide about your name is up to you," I said, placing the pasta in the oven, my voice steady. "I'll support you either way." And I meant it, because ultimately it's just a name. What matters is that they know who their real father is, not because of genetics or legal documents, but because I've been there for them, steady and loving through it all. The name on their birth certificates didn't change the fact that I had always been their father, that I had always been there when they needed me. In the end, karma had worked in unexpected ways. My ex's husband had taken my name off their birth certificates, but he couldn't take away what really mattered, my relationship with my children. And now, ironically, his professional reputation was largely built on the work I had done to save his company. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that sometimes the universe gives you a chance to rewrite the story. And in this case, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about redemption, both for me and for my kids.